Hi there YouTube, welcome to another episode of On the Road with ACDodd, but this time we're not tuning, we're training and we're going to Scotland. Alright, here we are up in Leven in Scotland and we're all set up. In fact, this is the second car we've had worked in and we're not tuning today as such. Well, I'm not tuning, I'm actually training. So we're using, we've got 4 cars we're working through, and the chap that's called me up here today is called Jim. And this is his car his wife uses, I understand. And this is nothing too exotic. It's just a mini special with a 1275 engine, which we're in the process of dialing in. Right, this is Jim. All right, Jim.
How you doing?
So Jim's asked me up here to do a 2-day training course, so we can obviously learn about setting up cars and minis, and he's got many other cars behind, which I'll perhaps show you in a little while in terms of other cars like Triumphs and things, and he's even got a standard, I think, standard 12.
Several standards.
Yeah, several standards. So yeah, lot of lovely old classic cars. So why did you call me up, Jim?
Over the years, I've tinkered away and done my bit, but I've always felt like I'm missing the final part of the jigsaw. And word of mouth and social media and everything, learned about AC and took the plunge after I'd asked them to machining primary gear and supply a camshaft and such like for me. Got chatting and here we are several months down the line, and what I've seen up to now, phenomenal.
Okay, yeah, so that's interesting. So we've, I deliberately didn't start filming this until we'd got a little bit under our belt. So the first car I did, and then I showed, basically I went through it and then spoke to Jim as I was doing that and telling him what I was doing. So this is the first car that he's now doing. But what have you found so far?
This car has always had a flat spot and never been the smoothest of running. Up till now, we've worked out that it was running way too rich from the get-go. Dialed that down a bit, moved on to ignition timing. It has been fitted for several years with an Alton distributor with no vacuum advance. Once you start running it and clocking it in, you realise that it's not as straight out the box and ready to go as you first think. So since then we've altered that same distributor, so it runs vacuum advance, redialed it in, and night and day. Again, it's opened up the power right through the rev range.
Yeah, okay. So and at the moment we haven't done the needle yet, so we're going to get onto that, and that'll be even better. So yeah, it was a classic case of just because it's got an Alden doesn't mean to say it's actually what it needs to be. Yes. So in this case, the Alden was fine, but it just needed a vacuum unit, which yes, we've obviously attached. So in terms of the training so far, what have you learned this morning in terms of has it been worth having me so far?
Definitely, without a shadow of a doubt. And we automatically think tuning. You think, oh, it's constant replacing parts, replace this, replace that. No, work out what you've got, work out what's not right for the vehicle in hand, work with that, make an assessment to do you then change this out or make the best out of what you have. We've seen it from both sides here this morning. Changing a couple of small items, serviceable items, made a big difference. And then you work with that to end up with a good result.
Excellent. Okay. Well, let's crack on with the tuning, and we'll perhaps come back to you later today or tomorrow and see how you're getting on so far.
Perfect.
Excellent.
Thank you.
So while Jim was working, I took the opportunity to have a quick look round some of his cars that he has in his possession, and there's some lovely standards here. So Jim's now just learning the subtle art of needle modification. Okay, back to the car that Jim's been working on. This one's been very good actually as a sort of teaching. Jim's had to cover measuring the advance curve, which we've done. The distributor's been out on this one, and he's converted the Alden unit into a vacuum unit because it was blanked off originally. So he's also measured the advance curve now with a vacuum as well as without the vacuum. We've obviously set the timing. We've been through, checked the coil, plugs, leads, everything else. And we've been on to the carburettor, and he's had to do some extensive needle modifications to this one, both very precise because it was very finicky at the part throttle end, and then more coarse mods at the full power end. So the original BDL needle was much too lean, which he's now sorted out. We've also done some fast drop damper modifications, and we've also matched the oil. So right, let's go over to Jim. So Jim's been working very hard on this car, and he's set it up, and it's running really well. In terms of learning for this particular car, what did you pick up from it?
Mostly was needle modifications, in all honesty. It's something I've always shied away from before, a bit of a fine art, but when it's explained to you what needs done, when it needs done, and where it needs done, it all makes sense. It is tricky, and it's not something you could just jump into, and I would imagine there will be a few mistakes along the way, but it's all a learning curve.
Just a quick one for you. Was in this particular one, it was quite a fine adjustment needed, wasn't it?
It was very, very fine, barely touching it, but the difference that made on the running of the car was second to none.
Yeah, okay. So what about some of the other modifications? Like I think we changed it to a vacuum unit from non-vacuum. This car for a long time had the Alden unit with no vacuum advance, which is great for obviously competition use when you're never on low throttle, and the difference it's made converting this to have a maximum vacuum advance is just altered the whole car, done away with niggling issues that we've always had with the car. Okay, all right. So taking it at a whole now, you've been out for a drive. How does it drive?
Brilliant. Brilliant. Can't fault it. Picks up third gear, put the foot down, smooth, just picks up and wants to go.
Okay, and what was it like before?
It was, you had to put up with it. You had to put up with it, flat spots and such like, but because it was, that's what you've got, you put it together, you think, oh well, it's better than it was, but you don't realise at that stage how good it actually can be.
Okay, excellent. Well, that's really good. So that ends day one of the training. So tomorrow is day two, and there's more of the same. So it's basically we've got two more cars lined up, different size carburetors, so you can start to learn about smaller carbs and different size engines, and then we'll see how that goes.
Thank you.
All right.
Much appreciated.
Okay, second day of training. This is car number 3. And we've got a nice old 850 Mini. So this one's been dialed in. I like these old cars. Look at that, beautiful. Classic machinery. So what we got here? So nice under bonnet shot. Jim started working on this one. As you can see, the distributor's out because we've realised that there's the vacuum unit's faulty, so we're putting a new vacuum unit in and also checking the advance curve. New spark plugs are in. These are BP5s, and this is a single HS2 engine with a standard airbox. So once we get the thing running and running nicely, we'll move over to the carburetor and we'll start dialing that in. But this is a completely stock 850 engine. So some of the things that the students end up doing is a little bit of repair work at the same time, and obviously this is the distributor out of that 850, and the new vacuum unit's going in, the old vacuum unit's out, and we're just going through the process of making sure that there's no play in this. The new ones, the parts don't necessarily fit wonderfully well, so we've got a little bit of play in it, so we're just making a shim to take that play out so it doesn't move. course, it's not all practical. There's a little bit of blackboard training that goes on as well, in terms of this is the hydrocarbon output, in terms of the way the engine runs, depending on whether we've got a lean or rich mixture. So there's always some theory that goes on to enable students to be able to work out what's going on, so they understand fully the events that are happening inside the engine. One of the other things that students have to do is have to make up their own gas analyzer equipment, and here Jim's copied my pendulum arrangement, and he's coupled that with a wideband and a rev counter to facilitate the use of this equipment while he's doing the tuning. And then obviously my needle motor's here, and this is where Jim here is using my needle motor to make needles, and he's obviously learning how to do that at the same time. The training also covers, you know, where and how much to take from needles and how to do that. So really, if you want to learn about how this is done, then this is probably one of the only training courses probably anywhere in the world that you can actually learn how to do this. So if you are interested, then you know where to contact. Well setting, 60 degrees, smack on the money, and not a feeler blade used anywhere. Here Jim is testing out his newly made equipment to determine how effective his needle modifications have been. So the Mark 1 850, what we ended up with in the end is obviously, as we said earlier, we've got the new vacuum unit on, obviously a new set of BP5 ES spark plugs, HC leads were all good, the coil was all good, and then obviously we went on to the carburettor. Now the carburettor on this one was actually quite worn, so this caused us a problem, but for the purposes of training, I let Jim persist with trying to tune a worn carburettor so he can see what it's see the problems, and we were able to actually get it somewhere near right. But the way to do that is we had to have I'll carry some special needles which are very, very lean, and that enabled us to bung up the hole somewhat in the jet and then reduce the fuel flow, so we was then able to get the carburettor to at least work. But it will mean that once this is rebuilt, obviously it'll have to have a completely new needle and start again. But we found that the air filter was blocked, and that was you know, that was rich in the mixture. And the main thing for this really is this runs really quite well, but it's been an excellent you know, an excellent experience for Jim to try and tune these, because these HS2 carburettors are extremely sensitive. So Jim now knows what that's all about. So let's go and have a quick chat with him and see what his view is. Righto, Jim. So that one took you a little bit of a while, but what did you learn about that one?
Obviously, when you go to the smaller engines, it's very fine engineering, very fine. Slightest adjustment makes a huge difference. Totally different kettle of fish from yesterday's 1275s. But no, really good. Just have to take your time and get it right.
Yeah, so as you said, extremely fine. Can you now see why it's kind of almost impossible to get these tuned just by taking needles off the shelf?
There's no way now, after doing what I've done this morning, there's no way I could ever do it. And it amazes me to how there's as many of these cars still on the road when majority of them will be running in the condition that, like this one for instance was. Yeah, it was running, drivable, but the difference between that and now is night and day.
Yeah, so this is an original 60s Mini, and it's now got a fueling curve of pretty much of a modern car, and obviously it drives very well. So you've been out for a drive in it. What's it drive like?
Aye, quite impressive for an 850. And I never personally drove this car before we'd done the tuning, but I think with how it's going now is a huge difference. Even on idle, it's so much sweeter, picks up through the rev range, sweet. We've done our best as we can with the condition of the carburetor that we've got, but it's not always about just replacing parts. You have to do the best you can with what you've got.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it's old
Yeah.
engineering and old parts.
I think it's worth saying at this point, I was saying to Jim that I wouldn't have tuned this one, but for the purposes of actually training, this has been an excellent opportunity to show Jim what it's like to work with something so finicky and worn.
Yeah, aye. Yeah,
So,
there's no point in starting with new stuff all the time. You've got to come across stuff that is worn where the majority of them are.
Yeah, absolutely. So, in terms of day 3 so far, what do you think?
Superb. I cannot fault it. I've got way more out of it than I ever thought I would.
Yeah.
It has highlighted stuff that I kind of knew the background to, but not the finesse of it.
Yeah.
It's also highlighted things that I thought were right, which clearly aren't. So yeah,
Excellent.
brilliant.
Right. Well, we're off for some lunch and then we'll crack on with the last car, and we'll come back and see you at the end of the day. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Okay, last car of the training weekend. This is a lovely Riley Elf. It's a Riley Elf, isn't it, this one? Yeah, it's a Riley Elf. And it's got a very nice, fresh 1100cc based engine. So it's basically a 998 engine that somebody's put 1100 cam in, which is, I always like these modifications. It makes the best use of a small bore. It's got a single HS4 on it. I think it's got a cam from Keith Carver. It's got 1.4 rockers on it. She's got the new old stock Dizzy. We've been through it. We needed a set of plugs. Coil was fine. HT leads are fine. Advanced curve, I think, might be a bit aggressive for this engine, but we'll wait until it's fully running. All we've done today is, because it's a fresh engine, it's not been out yet. We've just set it up, made sure it's running on the lean side, just to make sure we're not bore washing the engine, to make the running as sensible as possible. And in fact, in terms of Jim working on this one, he didn't have much to do, because the needles itself, we were able to change the needle in the carb and realise the fueling curve that we needed without any modifications. So he got away scot-free this afternoon, which is I'm sure he's happy about. Anyway, let's go and see Jim and see what he thought of the car and obviously of the training. All right, Jim, how'd you find that one?
Yes, slightly different again. Obviously, with it being a fresh engine, there's certain things that you have to rein back on and just watch what you're doing, be a bit more particular. But as I say, yes, there wasn't as much for me to do as I quite possibly would have liked. But sometimes you're lucky.
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes you have to take the bonuses when they come, and when you put a needle in and it happens to be somewhere near right, and actually the needle that was in it was somewhere near right, it's just a bit lean at the top end of the rev range. So we just need to make sure that at least when the owner decided to put his foot down, that there was sufficient fuel for it to actually fuel the engine.
Yeah.
Interesting one, this one, because the carb, even though it's got a single carb on it, and it's a new engine, I understand it might be an interim carb. Is that right?
Every chance. There's been a bit of time and money invested in this car, but the main aim for getting this car to the stage it is at was so it was here for the training, so I could work with AC from the very start and get up to the point. Now it's at a stage that we could run it in, get some miles on it, get load on it, look after it, then after that decide what we're doing carburation.
Yeah, because the carb on this one's a bit warm, wasn't it? So
it is. It is not as bad as some of them we've seen today.
Yeah.
But it has got a bit of wear about it. But we've set it up as close as we can for the run-in period. Just have to go back to its owner and say, you look to spend
Yeah.
another couple of quid. Because that's what it
I
comes
think
down
on
to.
this nice car, I think we're talking about twins, but we'll see what the owner comes up with on
Yes,
that one as well.
it's their decision at the end of the day.
All right, excellent. Anyway, so now you've completed the training. What's your view?
As I said earlier, brilliant. I thought I had too much nonsense in my head over the years to take more in, but AC's training is second to none and worth every penny.
Excellent. Well, I'm really glad that you got something out of that, and you found it such a real bonus to have. Was there anything about the training that you were surprised about?
To how simple it's put across with as much information. I was concerned before the training started it was going to be information overload, but no. Primarily, I'm a self-taught mechanic as a hobby. Come from my father. He was a good mechanic and engineer, and I've inherited that, and this was the next step to take it to where I want to be.
Excellent. Okay. Well, the glad thing is you've worked on 4 cars, and you've now got 4 cars that run as well as if I tuned them. So I'd say that you've done very well. So well done on that. And lastly, the question I like to ask people is, once they've done the training, is what's the best oil for an SU?
There's nothing set in stone. You have to get it to that stage in the tuning, then work it out for yourself to what's best for that particular car, carburetor and engine.
Excellent. Right. Okay. Well, the reason why I wanted to ask you that, and you didn't know I was going to ask you that question, is because I just wanted to make people understand that, when you go through the training like you have, you pick up on these things, and now you know why that is, and you've measured that, and you've worked that out, what needs to happen.
Aye.
All right.
Before the training, I was under the assumption SU damper oil was SU damper oil. No, forget that.
Okay. All right. Anyway, thank you very much. You've been an excellent student, so I really appreciate you letting me do some filming as well, because obviously I'd like to let people know what goes on. So this is the first video that we've done on the training. So I appreciate that, Jim. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi all. Hope you enjoyed that video. I just wanted to add on the end thing about oil. There's nothing wrong with the SU damper oil. It's absolutely fine, but the point is it's not necessarily suited to every application. One of the things you need to do with oil is you need to be able to take into account the different requirements of every engine and every carburetor setup. You also need to be able to take into account wear and tolerances. What Jim found there was that certain engines needed different oils compared to the factory supplied oil. So one of the things that I teach is that I carry 5 grades of oil, and that's because when I tune engines, I typically find I need one of those grade or one of those selection to be able to do that. So I just wanted you to understand why that comment was put at the end there, and that's because what we cover in the training is you need to match the oil to the application. Anyway, thanks for taking the time to watch this video. Please like and subscribe and share. And as ever, I'll see you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.